Today's topics include right against adverse impacts of climate change, subject of youth suicides, technology behind semiconductor chip, India's path to inclusive healthcare, women participation in electoral politics. These are all part where we are trying you to understand these topics so you can not only increase your content understanding but also can utilize in any of the competition exams that you are writing. So first is right against adverse effects of the climate change. Supreme Court has termed that whatever the Article 21, that is right, and Article 14, that is right for equality and right for protection and liberty. 21 is right to life. So these two articles, Supreme Court has now said that Article 21 and 14 cannot be fully complete till the time we acknowledge that climate change also is causing a greater misery to the people. That's why everyone should have the right against adverse effect of the climate change. So what does it say? That till the time there is a right against climate change, Article 21, which talks about right to life, cannot be fulfilled. It also talks about that Article 48A, that is part of our DPSP, it provides that state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment. Even Article 51A stipulates 51A, you know that it provides fundamental duties. So Article 51A also says that it shall be the duty of every citizen of a country to protect and improve the natural environment. That includes forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife. So it says, Supreme Court says that if we take into consideration Article 14, that is right to equality, 21, that is right to life, 48A, that provides protection and improvement to environment, and Article 51A, that also asks for duty, fundamental duty to protect and improve the natural environment. That's why we must make sure that right against climate change is now coming into a dictionary where people have the healthy and clean environment part of this particular duty. Despite government policies and rules and regulations recognizing the adverse effect of the climate change, there is no single or umbrella legislation in our country that relates to the climate change and attendant concerns. You see, climate change is giving birth to the problems of pollution, birth to the problems of agriculture productivity going down. It is also giving birth to the flood and irregular rainfall across the country. It is also causing the coastal areas water level to rise. It is also causing adverse heat waves or the snow melt also, that is causing actually the perennial rainfall capacity and rivers water load also to decrease. So these are the issues that the climate change is creating in our country. Although across the globe the problem is huge, but when we talk about our own country, we have started facing these kind of challenges. That's why Supreme Court has also noted that India, despite recognizing the adverse impact of the climate change, there is no singular legislation in our country that talks about climate change and attendant concerns. That's why Supreme Court says that it is appropriate for us to expand the definition of Article 21A to include right against climate change as part of the fundamental right. So the governments can be then, inclined to implement several measures where the climate change or related adverse phenomena for the people can be protected. On a clean environment, the court says that without a clean environment, that is clean environment which is stable and unimpacted by the vagaries of the climate change, the right to life is not fully realized. Rising temperatures, vector-borne diseases, air pollution, shortage in the food supply, all and even crop failures storming and flooding are all happening because of the climate change. That's why the inability of the underserved communities, the vulnerable people, they are the one actually whose capacity to adapt and mitigate the climate change concerns is the lowest across the globe. So the underprivileged and the vulnerable section are the community which are bearing the brunt of the climate change in a larger capacity. That's why Article 14 that talks about right for equality, it will not be realized by the people till the time we remain concerned about the rights of the underprivileged and vulnerable section of society. Supreme Court bench actually made this kind of announcement when it was hearing a case that was for Great Indian Bustard. The problem with the Great Indian Bustard bird is it is now becoming a critically endangered category. Great Indian Bustard is having a threat of habitat loss, and the power lines, those are actually passing through Rajasthan, especially the solar power and these kind of renewable energy power lines. So government in its affidavit, because Supreme Court some years back talked about the power lines which are above the ground to be shifted under the ground. In Supreme Court, Center filed a detailed affidavit, and Center said that it is not feasible for us to put the power lines under the surface or in the sand. Why? Because it then actually becomes very problematic because of the financial sources. It also becomes problematic because there is a lot of transmission losses that can happen if we put power under the ground, power lines under the ground. Even they also say that if we do it, then solar power generation also will get affected. And India's energy concerns are so higher that close to 50% of our installed energy will be met by the renewable energy sources. So that is one of the concern that center filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court actually admitted the center's affidavit and said that okay, you don't need to do this, but make sure that the solar power actually is also enhanced in a manner which provides a clean atmosphere, which provides actually the clean environment, because right against climate change is now, or we are making it a part of fundamental rights. That's why they say that it is important for the country to increase the supply of solar. And they say that why it is also important, because when we talk about India's condition, close to 25% of the global supply increase that will happen, 25% of that global supply increase will come from India itself. That's why it is important for India to do renewable energy production. Second, it also talks about, Supreme Court also says that because of the climate change, the issue is so higher that we need to take care of the solar energy first. So that is also the second requirement that Supreme Court talks about. So they say that it is that's why important for our country to shift to the renewable energy. Failure to do so can increase our dependence on coal imports or oil imports also, and energy security of the country can then actually gets threatened. That's why renewable energy is both strategically important plus economic security wise is also important. So whenever you are writing about the topic, you can mention that renewable energy is not only for economics, but also for the ecology and achieving the country's economic security plus ecological security plus energy security. Ecological security in the sense that when we burn fossil fuels or like coal fired power plants, then that can create foul air or associated pollutants. When the renewable energy is there, you must understand that a coal fired power plant, even half of the emissions will be in solar power generation. Even actually 1/10 of this will be in the nuclear power generation. That's why how important the renewable energy sector you can understand. And that is why Supreme Court has also talked about that right against climate change is now a fundamental right under the definition of Article 21A. You must also know that Supreme Court, it was the Supreme Court only which talked about, sorry, 21. 21A is about right to education. So 21 Supreme Court time and again expanded the article under 21, that is like, against sound, noise, or for good quality air. But now it is giving a right against climate change. So tomorrow, what is the benefit of it? So tomorrow, the governments actually will be very much concerned about this. In the coming time, there can come a legislation which talks about climate change and giving associated benefits to the people, even those people whose rights are getting violated, because this will be cast in stone in our constitution. That's why those people who are getting affected, or the vulnerable communities, etc., would or can then approach the Supreme Court for the protection of their rights, and the remedy can be made available. So that can be the benefit of it being included in the constitution. So these are the things that the Supreme Court has noted down. So first time a Supreme Court in our country has talked about giving any kind of right against the climate change, and it can become one of the medium to make people live better. We now move to the second topic, and that is subject of youth suicide in our country. Youth suicide, when we talk about, India is now, according to NCRB data, and you can mention directly in your answers, that close to 1.7 lakh people, allowed 1 lakh 70,000 people in India in 2022 died by suicide. When a person does suicide, you must understand that there is not a single reason for suicide. They are all the reasons involved. But when we talk about the youth suicide, then out of total 1.7 lakh, close to 41% of suicide are from the category where the age group is less than 30 years. That's why suicide is now becoming a major threat for India, that is causing the problem for its demographic dividend actually to take these kind of steps. When the youth of our country, those are in their productive age, they end their lives like this one, then it's a blot on the country's image also. The country's economic potential also goes for a toss then. That's why states should take a bigger concern. State in the sense that it's a political state. So the country's government should take into consideration what is happening around. Suicide is a complex human behavior, and there is no single cause for it. So it's an interaction, it's a result of the interaction between biological, psychological, familiar, and sociocultural factors. When we talk about biological factors, when we talk about psychological, when we talk about familiar concerns, and socioeconomic factors like caste and other subjugations, these make it common behavioral complex for our country. When we talk about the larger data that emerges, around close to mental health problems has been the biggest component, 54%. 36% traumatic families. Academic stress is around 23%. Social and lifestyle factors 20%. Violence around 22%. Economic distress 9.1%. Relationship factor around 9%. That's why most commonly reported risk factor are these. In your questions, you can be asked directly that there is a greater phenomena emerging in our country where youth is committing suicide. What are the reasons and what kind of policy measures the government can take? And even you can utilize in any of your, broader dynamics of essay or other things also. There are specific socio-cultural factors for suicide among young girls and students. Arranged and early marriages, young motherhood, low social status, domestic violence, and economic dependence are all well documented. Even rigid gender roles and discrimination have also been implicated. A system of education with an emphasis of scoring, marks, and 1 point examination system, along with the parental pressure and high expectations from oneself and the educational institutions, are also contributing to suicide. Why this point also become important? Because recently we have seen in people who are or students who are preparing for their JEE or NEET or other examinations are dying by suicide. One city in our country is also getting infamous for these kind of things. So the problem actually is arising because of these theme system, where system of education that emphasizes on scoring marks, a 1 point examination system, and even parental pressure and high expectations from oneself and educational institutions are contributing to the suicide. Enormous competition in the educational institution is also causing a major worry. Alcohol and substance abuse are also the known risk factor in the suicide kind of things. The media has a strong influence on the vulnerable. Close to one study actually talked about when that media irresponsibly sometime report about it. What happens is, when there was one celebrity who committed suicide few years back, on Google's search, this search amount actually increased. That people were searching queries like how to commit suicide. So these kind of tendencies are also causing the suicide rates to increase further. So the risk factor have been like biological factors, mental pressure, psychological, sociocultural, and familial issues. So what are the solutions? As like there are lot many, factors. So we have lot many solutions also. One among them is our academic solution. We should create an education system that takes away the form of 1 point examination or other things. We should impart value based education, plus the industry specific courses, plus any kind of system where the education can then be utilized practically in life. The rote learning should go away. The competitive pressure cannot be the sole mark of understanding the academic qualities or understanding the potential of the student. So an education system has to be made more dynamic and modern. Another can be about the mental strength of the people. People who are working in the private field or public field should be given proper training. Their health, lifestyle health also should be given proper concern. A healthy lifestyle also can contribute to the less mental problems and less healthcare kind of concerns. The emotional well-being of the people, either through emotional intelligence or other training method, can also contribute to this kind of phenomena. Societal changes to the religion need to be addressed. Societal changes to reduce stigma and discrimination based on caste, religion, etc. need to be addressed. In When we talk about in 2019, Ministry of Health constituted a task force to develop nation suicide prevention strategy for our country. This particular strategy you can directly mention in your answer, national suicide prevention strategy. So this particular strategy was launched in 2022 with the objective of reducing suicide by 10% till 2030. The strategy recognized that there should be collaboration among ministries: Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Social Welfare, Broadcasting, Information and Broadcasting, etc. The strategy also focused on the need to leverage educational institutions and youth organizations to promote mental health and reduce substance and drug abuse. So, just like there are multiple reasons behind increasing youth suicide, there are multiple factors actually which become the solution. But government should take care of this concern in a much larger aspect, because country is losing its youth and the productive part of the population or the demographic dividend. We now move on to the third one, and that is, what is the technology behind manufacturing semiconductor chip? The role of semiconductor in our economy is, you can understand how big the semiconductor dreams of a country is. Semiconductor goes, or the chip actually goes into all the electronic devices. And now the electronic is becoming future of everything, where electronic based vehicle mobility or mobile phones or the gadgets etc. are becoming our daily lives part. Suppose say there is an electric vehicle, close to 2000 chips would be installed in that electric vehicle. Even when we talk about IoT, that is Internet of Things, even when we talk about smart appliances at our home, etc. So the semiconductor or the chips are now becoming part of our everyday life. That's why when we try to get that what is the technology, we must understand what is semiconductor chip. So a semiconductor has the properties between a conductor and an insulator. So what is a conductor? A conductor is one that conducts electricity. An insulator is one which does not conduct electricity. So a semiconductor property would be falling between conductor and insulator. So in its purest form, the semiconductor is a very weak conductor of electricity. But when the impurities are mixed into the semiconductor material, because of those impurities, the conducting properties of the semiconductor goes higher. And these are called dopants. By taking a pure semiconductor and carefully injecting certain parts with the specific dopants, complex circuits can be printed on the semiconductors. So you must understand that by giving the dopants, the conducting properties of that semiconductor material goes higher. The process is crucial to creating an intricate work of art on a paper or a wall by using a bunch of stencils and spray paints of different colors. What is the transistor? Transistor is one of the earliest electronic component to be built using semiconductors. So because of the transistor, etc., the size of the electronic devices have become very small. Earlier you must have seen or you must have heard about how the large size of computer used to be. Even it was the size of the rooms and the computing power was so less. Now the size of the computer is that you can pack in your bag or in your even pocket, but the computing capacity of these is so higher. And it has been made because we have printed so many of these devices in a single piece of paper or wall. So these are the phenomena of transistor. So transistor, one of the earliest component to be built using a semiconductor, is a versatile device. It can function as an electronic switch. A typical semiconductor chip can have millions or billions of these interconnected switches that work together to perform various logical and computational operations. Because of the transistors can be packed in a very neat or very small size. In a computer there are billions of transistors even. So that is also one of the big reason why the size of the circuits or the devices have become very less. A transistor can also function as an amplifier to amplify the weak signals and is an integral part of the circuits. So what is a fabrication technology? Technology has progressed by a relentless pace since the semiconductor chip was first conceptualized more than 60 years ago. New manufacturing technologies have been introduced at a regular cadence. The level of miniaturization has helped it. Switching off and on faster per second and reducing the consumption like battery life, etc., has been also made a part. The industry has used labels like 26 nanometer, 16 nanometer to introduce each new manufacturing technology. You must understand what is nanometer, and nanometers have been made a part of this particular technology. Though not always accurate, you can think of this number as representing the dimensions of single transistor. So this is the technology through which we are giving the size where the switching off and switching on can be made very efficient. That battery technologies can be made even more so that they can work for longer hours, and the computational capacity increases much. So what is known as wafer? So these are the words actually that can be asked in the competition exam. So what is a wafer? So wafer is one. A semiconductor chip is manufactured just like as a postage stamp. A sheet of stamp is printed on a piece of paper and then each individual stamp is cut out. Similarly, an array of chips are printed on a circular piece of the semiconductor. It is then diced into to create individual chips. So large wafer size allows more chips to be printed. A smaller chip actually, a smaller wafer may include lesser chips. Once the wafer has been diced into chips, each individual chip has to be packaged in a protective covering. That's why the tiny wires have to be routed from the device to the boundary of the package. So this is the technology that is behind the semiconductor dream. We now move on to the fourth one, and that is shaping India's path to the inclusive healthcare. We must understand what is inclusive healthcare. The healthcare that is available, accessible, and affordable for each section of our society. There is no discrimination among genders. There is no discrimination among caste or religion, any other thing. There is no discrimination that is seen across the regions. So that's why we want to have the inclusive healthcare. You must understand that healthcare, to increase the inclusive healthcare, there cannot be discrimination between regions also, whether this is a urban or this is a rural region. You must know the data set that close to 75% of our health facilities are now part of the urban, where the 25% of the healthcare industry is now concerned about rural. That it is because it is even, the condition is even stark, because when we talk about rural population is close to 65% and urban population is close to 35%. So all the health facility of our country, which are catering to the lesser population but in a larger number, close to 75%, while in the rural the challenge is that actually despite having high population, the healthcare facilities available is only 25%. According to World Health Organization, India has close to zero point 0.8 doctors per 1000 people, and that is also one of the very big concern. We must have seen how hard the corona period for us was, because of the public and the private healthcare, I mean industry, that is, or healthcare facilities that were available lesser quantity. How hard it was for us to control corona, thanks to the vaccine discovery, that India quickly got over this particular disease. Otherwise, according to experts, the problem could have been even worse. That's why we always talk about the affordable, the accessible, that is the healthcare that is available for our country's people. So we must make sure that whatever the institutions for health are coming mostly to serve the rural areas. So that's why the rural areas population can always get a better quality care into their own areas or the areas those are nearby. One of the problem for the country is also emerging for the non-communicable disease sector. Across the globe, the non-communicable disease is actually trying to raise its head, and world can lose close to $6 trillion of its GDP by 2030 if the non-communicable diseases keep on increasing at the pace where it is increasing now. So those people who are dying because of the NCDs faster than the communicable diseases. When we talk about the communicable diseases, world over, the guardrails have been made where the communicable disease fighting capacity of the country have been increasing. But when we talk about the non-communicable diseases, the problem is enormous. So close to $6 trillion can be lost when we are dealing with the non-communicable diseases. So an inclusive healthcare has to make sure that yes, this particular NCDs also are well taken care of, just like the communicable diseases have been well taken care of or are reducing in the amount of impact that they used to have. Then comes the insurance part of the healthcare sector. Healthcare is important and insurance is important because it is the insurance that provides people with the affordability or even accessibility. Affordability, because insurance actually is one that reduces the cost of final, the packages that people receive. The packages or the amount of the, spendings that a person has to spend on his healthcare concern, insurance provides them the guarantee or the support. Insurance also allows the private institutions to mushroom into those areas where health is a major challenge or health reach is a major challenge. Because of the competition among private sector, the market forces would want the demand, but the supply to be go into those areas where the demand is. So when the insurance penetration of our country's health will be higher on a higher proportion, not only people's out of pocket expenditure will be lesser, but also the reach of the healthcare facility will increase. Government just need to regulate it better or the softer regulations. So that is why the enormous amount of health insurance premium etc do not arise. Plus all those payment settlement from the insurance companies can happen at a faster pace. So these kind of concerns for the consumer can then be taken away. But insurance penetration for healthcare is also important. That's why whenever we are talking about the inclusive healthcare, there should not be any discrimination on religion, race, gender, any kind of religion, region, etc. Inclusive healthcare should also take into consideration non-communicable and communicable disease both. Public and private sector are both actually should take part into this one. Insurance industry has to be made better, and the person who is sitting at the remotest corner have to be given security that whenever there is a challenge for them, the institutions are there to help him. So that is the part of the inclusive healthcare. So when we talk about the private industry also, for them the regulations can be implemented. Regulations should be softer so the private industry can mushroom. And as you know, private industry is one which creates actually the supply into those areas where the demand is. You must have also seen that how when the economy was opened up in 1991, how we have fared from 1990s to 2020s or 30s. You must have also seen that how in telecom actually the inclusive connectivity has become or part of the how important the connectivity has become and how the faster networks have reached to the other areas. So we must also take into consideration these things. We now move on to the next topic, that is women candidates grew 16-fold from 1957 to 2019. According to some reports, this particular phenomena is there is a 16-fold jump. The percentage of women in parliament, it was 4.5% in 1957. Right now we are standing at 14.5% in 2019. In 2024 the chances that it will increase, and with the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, we are slated to get 33% of parliamentarians, at least 33% of parliamentarians, those will be women. So once women actually themselves see as potential leaders, then it will become an inclusive parliament. The democracy will further mature. With the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, the 33% reservation that was provided to women actually has also given them so much of confidence that now the population from that particular lower levels of our political demography is now reaching to the upper levels. 4.5% of the women, those used to be part, now are becoming 14.5% in 2019 in parliament. And accordingly, in 2029, this is supposed to become to 33%. So it will be a huge jump for the country. It's a when we talk about earlier why the women actually were lesser in candidates, or the number has never passed 1000 candidates, because although women have the winnability factors, but they are not given the kind of freedom that a male member enjoys. As of now, when we talk about the male members, close to 7,300 in 2019 were the male members who were candidate in the Lok Sabha elections, while the women were even less than 1,000. But the phenomena for male numbers increased by 3.4 or 3.5 times, while it increased 16 times for women. So more women are becoming part of the candidature and political cycle, and this can create a wonderful thing for our country's democracy, because those women who would be sitting in the parliament as policy makers or legislation makers, they will be understanding their concerns more. I'm not saying that the male member do not understand, but when women member themselves make policy for women members, they will be having more greater thought actually about their own issues, which a male member may not understand. So these kind of things can be always beneficial for our democratic framework, maturing of our democracy and making democracy more inclusive. Thank you for listening to today's topic.
For more such videos, you can like the button and subscribe the channel. Thank you.